Okay, folks, well, we'll get started. I'm sure a few others will join throughout the show itself. But first of all, welcome. So I'm Stefan. I'm the Business Development Manager here at Amidst. A little bit of background on me. So I've been in property for probably going on about 10 years now. My role here is mainly as the first point of contact for our landlords. So well, obviously I know a few names here already. Hopefully you can put sort of a face to a name now with me, but we look after a large number of landlords across Brighton and Hove, so whether that's single unit owners through to sort of multiple property portfolios in the region. As you probably have noticed, tonight's topic is on EPCs. So the reason we're exploring this today is there's been quite a number of proposed changes actually coming into effect, where it's actually going to have a rather large impact on the rental side of things, which in turn is obviously going to affect yourselves as landlords. No number of agents are here as well, so it'll be interesting to see what people's takes are on it. I know there's been a lot of questions already asked in the chat and through your submissions. I will be going through some of those today, hopefully, and ticking off and answering a few of those. But if there's anything in the meantime, because I know there's been a lot of questions specifically to sort of your individual situations, do feel free to reach out to me at stefan.g@coaps.co.uk. I'll put my details up at the end as well, or just give us a call just for a bit of an informal chat. What I would ask, just whilst we're waiting for a few others to join, if I could get you guys just to make sure you're muted for the duration and popping off your cameras, that'd be much appreciated. But now I think that's everybody in, we'll get started. So moving straight on. So again, I might be telling you a lot of things here tonight which you're already aware of, but I think it's always good to cover the basics. And then, as I say, we'll go into it in a bit more detail, a bit more about the proposed changes, and hopefully that'll answer some of your questions. So, an EPC, it's an energy performance certificate. It basically gives you detailed information about your property's energy efficiency and carbon dioxide emissions. To receive an EPC, so you have what's called an energy assessment survey carried out on your property. And your domestic energy assessor will then perform internal and external inspections to determine how energy efficient your building is, and again then provide suggestions as to how you can achieve higher levels of efficiency through certain improvements. So they will look at such things as windows, roofs, walls, insulation, fireplaces, the year the property was built, solar panels, all these things which can have a large impact on your energy efficiency. And once they've actually performed that, they will then put together your EPC and grade your property's energy efficiency and its performance, with A being the most efficient all the way through to G being the least efficient. So the EPC itself, once that's taken place, that'll be then valid for 10 years. Once it runs out, you don't need to get a new one unless you're entering into a new tenancy with new tenants or selling the property on. As I've just mentioned, your EPC will also come with a recommendation report containing advice and improvements that will make your property more energy efficient. And your energy's assessor suggestions may include cavity wall insulation, loft insulation, insulating pipes, reducing water usage, more energy efficient double glazing, low energy usage light bulbs, solar panels, the list goes on. So it's a lot of things there which I'm sure you're already well aware of. So just to cover off where we are currently with EPCs. So in 2008, rental properties across England and Wales were required, or are required, to have an energy performance certificate just at flat rate, so anywhere between the A and G, as we just mentioned. In April of 2018, the minimum energy efficiency standards came into force. This required all properties in England and Wales to have a minimum rating of E or above. That then changed on the 1st of April 2020. The minimum energy efficiency standards then now apply to all existing tenancies, not just new ones, starting from 2018 onwards. Currently, if you don't have an EPC or a valid EPC rating of E or above, from this date, you cannot legally let the property. And this in turn is in reference to non-commercial rental properties. Commercial properties have a slightly different set of rules to follow, but as we'll be sticking with the domestic side of things tonight. So I know some of the questions in the chat which were submitted prior to this were around what properties were exempt. So we'll cover off those nice and quickly. So you're looking at temporary buildings, places of worship, industrial sites, workshops, detached buildings with floor space of 50 meters or less, or buildings which are due to be demolished. Sorry, bear with me just whilst I admit a few more people into this. Perfect. So, moving on into probably what's the actual interesting part and relevant to us tonight. What are the new EPC regulations being discussed for landlords? So, after consultation in December of 2020, the government have announced changes to the minimum energy efficiency standards across England and Wales. So, the government proposed that all rental properties will now require an EPC rating of C or above by 2028. The original proposal was that all regulations would be introduced for new tenancies from 2025, followed by then all tenancies from 2028. However, this was actually changed in March of this year, and the deadline is now 2028 for all rentals. This is really in relation to the government's target for net zero by 2050, which you may know about. Essentially, the regulations they're looking to bring in hope to make homes more energy efficient, reduce carbon emissions, and as I say, hit that target of net zero by 2050. Currently, the penalty for not having a valid EPC is actually at £5,000, but as of 2028, that'll be going up to a whopping £30,000. Just to give that context, at the moment, the government are suggesting that there's going to be approximately 21% of properties or properties within the private rented sector, which will not meet minimum requirements and will require investment. So the reason we're talking about this now is for, well, a number of reasons, because I know 2028 as a whole may seem like a long way off. But as I say, 1 in 5 properties, according to the ONS, so the Office of National Statistics, that actually means that approximately 1 million properties between now and 2028 will require works doing. It also links in part to the Renters Reform Bill, which you may have been tuned in for previously that we discussed. That's currently going through Parliament. And one of the parts that this then links to is actually, it's titled Providing a Reasonable Degree of Thermal Comfort. So what that means is the heating systems within the property must be able to heat 2 or more rooms in the home. And even if the systems cover most of the homes, landlords need to make sure that the home is warm enough for the tenants under the Housing, Health and Safety ranking system. So in short, by making obviously properties more efficient, you'll tick this box and you'll be compliant. So just to touch on what we've noted down here. So for point 1, with the new rules being announced, there's going to be likely a rush to book tradesmen. There's going to be potentially shortage on materials, which in turn is going to increase lead times to when you can have the works done, which in turn is going to lead to an increase in prices. We will cover off shortly some schemes which could be of help to help you get through that, and again, just make it a little lighter on your bank balance. But it's always good to get things underway sooner rather than later. I mean, to give you an idea, we here at Carats, we're working with a number of our landlords already to get those works underway, just to get ahead of the curve. On number 2, so spreading the costs. So the government has suggested if you're having to make X, Y, and Z changes, those 3 that could be insulation in the roof, that could be double glazing, any number of big projects basically for your property. And they're not only going to consume a lot of time, but also financially, if you were to have to outlay for those 3 things in one go, that's going to be a significant outlay financially. So rather than having it all in one big lump sum for you have to pay, if you were to do 1 a year, let's say, it's just going to make life that much more comfortable for you and give you time to see what other new changes have been brought in, what other schemes are out there for you to actively use. And then thirdly, so this one's a little bit of a different one. So the government themselves have actually, what they've discussed it and called it and proposed it as fabric first principle. So what I mean by that is that the works carried out with improvements to the fabric of the building, i.e. insulation, windows and doors, have to take place first before you'd be eligible for certain grants. So, for example, if you were approved for grants within the property, if let's say you wanted to upgrade the heating system, you might be unable to do so until you've actually improved the insulation in the property or replace the windows, because their thinking is if you can do that and that in turn brings the property up to a standard or EPC rating of C or above, then the other measures, the grants in place won't affect you. So just to touch on, there's a number of schemes out there, and we can go all through each in some detail. What I would say, don't worry about obviously noting down everything. This will be sent out alongside some other things with some useful reading, because I will throw a few figures and dates at you. So if you don't catch them, this will be able to be sent out. You can rewatch it at a later date. But if we go through the schemes one by one, hopefully some will be relevant to you and of interest. So number one, the boiler update scheme. So the scheme itself provides one grant per property to help cover the cost and installation of low carbon heating systems such as heat pumps. So to throw some figures at you, so for example, an air source heat pump, you're going to be looking at approximately £5,000 for that. Same price again would be for a biomass boiler, or for example, a ground source heat pump, you'd be looking at approximately £6,000. To be eligible for this, so you're looking to have an installation capacity within the property of approximately 45 kilowatts per hour, which actually covers most homes, but also your current EPC would not be able to have any outstanding recommendations for loft or cavity wall installation. So this relates to what I just mentioned about how you'd have to, fill out that sort of proposed fabric first principle of making sure those works were done before you'd be eligible for those grants. The scheme itself is actually going to run until 2028, so you've got between now and the cut-off point when the EPC changes come into effect. And you'll also need to be living in England or Wales and own the property to be eligible. With number two, so a very good one, I think, in my opinion. So there's VAT relief on energy saving materials. So until March or 31st of March 2027, zero rate VAT will apply to the installation of certain energy saving materials in residential properties. So that'll actually be sorted and done by your supplier of those products. And the zero rate can actually be also applied to ancillary supplies involved in the installation. So what I mean by that, for example, is let's say you were to get an air source heat pump put into the property, and that would then in turn would require new radiators and pipe work. The radiators and pipework will also be charged at 0% VAT, as the radiators are a necessary benefit from that heat pump. Then on to number three, so the Green Deal loan. The scheme itself was actually originally a government initiative, but is now, as of 2015, being switched to a private backing in 2015. This loan itself can be put towards a variety of improvements such as insulation, heating, draft proofing, double glazing, renewable energy generation such as solar panels, heat pumps, as I keep going on about. And they're actually then repaid through the electricity bills themselves. So the repayments, they shouldn't exceed the savings made on your energy bill, but that doesn't mean that the bill savings will match the loan repayments, as it doesn't take into account, unfortunately, the increases in energy prices, which I know we've all felt over the last year, or probably a little bit longer now. The loan itself is actually, which I think is good, is actually linked to the property. So if you were to sell up, once you'd taken charge of the Green Deal loan, that would then roll over to the new owner if you were to sell up. On to then number four, so the energy company obligation. So this is more leaning towards if you have any qualifying tenants from low income or vulnerable households, they themselves may be able to access an energy company's obligation grant to support energy efficiency improvements. So for example, if your property has an EPC rating of F or G, the grant itself must go towards upping that rating to a band D or above. And the funding for the private rented properties will support the least energy efficient homes. So if your property is in between bands E and G, you'll be eligible for these grants. If it's anything above that, you wouldn't be. So the way that would work is you'd be encouraging eligible tenants basically to apply for the grant to help improve your property energy efficiency. So for years to come, they could put in energy or electrical storage heaters, insulation grants such as the free cavity wall insulation or loft insulation grant. And the government have said with the energy company obligation, they're actually aiming for that to upgrade nearly 500,000 homes. And those upgrades should, they say, over the next 4 years, bring those properties up to around, or most of them, up to the EPC band of C, making them obviously compliant with the overall theme here. And then lastly, the empty property grant. This will change from local council to local council. So I know we're going to see a number of people here who I know have properties elsewhere outside the Brighton area. So you will need to speak to your local council. But in short, they may be able to offer you some sort of financial support to help make energy improvements to that property. There may be certain restrictions. So, for example, some local schemes, you are not going to be able to sell that property within 5 years of receiving that grant. Or another one might be you have to actually rent the property through the private leasing scheme for that 5-year period. But I mean, if you're in the property sector, right, private rented sector for the long haul, looking into any sort of thing like that could be really worthwhile. So that's sort of those 5 in total. There may be others which come out over time, but those are sort of the 5 which we felt were most poignant and sort of benefit at this stage. As I mentioned, it seems to be, it's quite a small topic, but obviously there's some vast changes being made and being discussed. There are obviously a lot of questions. So hopefully I've covered off a few of those which I read today and over sort of your submissions. There are more which are more individual to your specific situation. So over the next sort of week or so, I'll be coming back to you with answers on that. But as I say, you are more than welcome if there's anything from tonight which I've not covered, or as I say, which is specific to your situation, you're more than welcome to drop me an email on here. As I say, we've got all of your details, so we will be sending out sort of a pack afterwards with a few more bits and bobs which could be of interest over time. Rather than, as I say, rather than me covering off something which is only going to be better benefit to one person here tonight. So I'm well aware, as I say, it's not the largest topic, but it's something that we think people should be aware of, especially we've made our landlords aware, hopefully, and they are making active changes already to make sure that they're compliant, and it's just one less worry for them with so many big things coming in. What I'd say is, obviously, appreciate you guys coming tonight. We're going to be doing a lot more of these sort of little short webinars. There's lots of topics to cover. There's lots of changes. If there's anything you want us to specifically speak about and have a bit of research into and come out with, do feel free to drop me an email or pop some messages in the chat and I can come back to you. Make sure you sign up to our mailing list. As I say, we update you regularly with things. It's going to be upcoming webinars, again, little short things like that. So I appreciate it's a nice and short one tonight from me, guys, but thank you for coming. As I say, we'll be sending out everything in the near future and we'll hopefully see you again soon. Thank you very much.